When you stop fearing a narcissist, something shifts. The game they've been playing suddenly stops working. Your silence starts to speak louder than their control. Your calmness becomes their chaos. They can't read you anymore, and that terrifies them. Because for the first time, you're not dancing to their tune. You've reclaimed your power, and they can feel it. When you stop reacting, something profound begins to unfold. The silence you hold, once mistaken for weakness, turns into a force the narcissist cannot manipulate. You begin to understand that every time you reacted in the past, you were feeding their need for control. The arguments, the explanations, the attempts to make them understand, all of it gave them energy. But when you grow still, when you no longer feel the need to prove your truth or defend your peace, you create a kind of power they can't touch. Silence, when rooted in self-awareness, isn't emptiness. It's strength in its purest form. A narcissist lives off reaction. They crave the emotional spikes, the anger, the confusion, the tears. It tells them they still matter, that they still hold influence over your inner world. But when you no longer respond, you shatter the illusion that they control the narrative. They begin to sense that something has changed, even if you never say a word. The energy between you shifts. They'll try harder, poke, provoke, push to get a rise out of you, but the more they push and the less you move, the more powerless they become. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back the emptiness inside them. They project chaos, expecting you to absorb it. When you don't, it bounces back toward them, revealing their own instability. That's why your calmness unsettles them so deeply. It forces them to face what they've always run from, themselves. This is where your healing begins, not in confrontation, not in revenge, but in the quiet decision that you will no longer hand them your peace on a silver platter. There's a moment in every survivor's journey when silence stops feeling like suppression and starts feeling like sovereignty. You realize you don't owe anyone your emotional energy, especially not someone who uses it as a weapon. You start responding from awareness instead of impulse. You start noticing how calm feels safer than chaos. And in that awareness, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you once lost trying to please or protect them. It's not about ignoring them, it's about mastering yourself. It's about realizing that your voice has more power when it's used with intention, not desperation. The narcissist will never understand your silence because they measure power through control, but your silence is control, not over them, but over yourself. And that's something they can't steal or imitate. When you stand in that quiet strength, something sacred happens. You begin to attract peace instead of drama, clarity instead of confusion, and strength instead of fear. You realize that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means self-respect. It's the moment you stop being part of their story and start writing your own. And in that silence, they lose the one thing they can't live without, your attention. That's when the balance of power truly shifts, and you, for the first time, are free. Fear is the oxygen a narcissist breathes. It keeps their illusion of control alive. When you show fear, they sense it instantly. It's in your tone, your hesitation, your body language. Fear tells them you still see them as powerful, that they still have influence over you. But the moment you stop feeding that fear, everything changes. The entire dynamic collapses. The narcissist begins to lose their grip, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped playing the game altogether. Showing no fear doesn't mean you never feel afraid. It means you refuse to let that fear dictate your behavior. It's an internal shift, subtle but undeniable. You begin to see the narcissist not as a monster, but as a deeply insecure person who thrives on emotional control. When that understanding sinks in, your fear starts to dissolve. Their threats, their manipulation, their coldness, it no longer shakes you the way it once did. You start realizing that the power they seemed to have over you was always borrowed from your reactions. You were the source of it all along. When you stop reacting in fear, they become confused. They expect panic when they withdraw affection, anger when they provoke you, guilt when they gaslight you. But instead, you remain steady, composed, unbothered. That steadiness terrifies them because it reveals how powerless they truly are. They can no longer manipulate your emotions or predict your responses. You become an unknown variable in their predictable pattern of control, and that unpredictability dismantles their confidence. They might escalate their behavior at first using intimidation, silent treatment, or emotional bait to get a reaction. But you'll notice something powerful. Each time you refuse to feed into it, their efforts become more desperate, more hollow. They start losing the energy that once made them feel in charge. Your calm detachment forces them to face a truth they've spent their entire lives avoiding, that their power was never real. Showing no fear is not about aggression or defiance. It's about peace. It's about standing in your truth so deeply that their attempts to shake you feel small and distant. You stop personalizing their actions, you stop seeking their approval, you stop believing that you need their validation to feel worthy. That's when the chains begin to fall away. You're no longer reacting to their fear tactics. You're simply observing them with clarity and compassion, but no attachment. And here's the beautiful irony. When you no longer fear the narcissist, you no longer need to defeat them. The battle ends on its own. You see them for what they are, a collection of wounds disguised as dominance. And instead of shrinking, you expand, you grow beyond their reach, beyond their narrative. No fear means full power, your own. It's the moment you reclaim your emotional sovereignty. It's the quiet realization that their approval means nothing and your peace means everything. And when that truth takes root, the narcissist loses their throne forever. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks that only you can open. When you finally set them with clarity and without apology, everything begins to change. A narcissist thrives in blurred lines where your yes doesn't really mean yes and your no can be negotiated. They survive in the chaos between what you allow and what you fear to say. But when you begin to stand firm, when you no longer bend to please or explain your worth, they start to feel the ground shift beneath them. Boundaries to a narcissist are like mirrors. They reflect back the limits of their control, and that reflection makes them deeply uncomfortable. At first, setting a boundary feels terrifying. You've been conditioned to think that peace comes from keeping them happy, from avoiding conflict, from being the bigger person. But the truth is, peace doesn't come from avoiding tension. It comes from honoring your truth, even if that truth disappoints someone else. A narcissist will test your boundaries immediately. They'll question, guilt trip, and manipulate you to make you doubt your right to protect your space. But this is where your strength is forged, in the discomfort of standing your ground. You don't need to shout or justify your limits. A quiet, firm no carries more power than hours of explanation. Every time you hold your boundary, you teach them that your energy is not free to take. You teach yourself that love doesn't require self-abandonment, and slowly the dynamic begins to shift. They may get angry, distant, or cold, but you'll notice something. It no longer shakes you. You start to understand that their reaction is not your responsibility. Your job is not to manage their emotions, but to protect your own. Boundaries are how you teach people to treat you. And for a narcissist, that lesson is their undoing. They realize they can no longer manipulate, guilt, or charm their way into your world. You stop explaining, stop overgiving, stop accepting crumbs. Your silence and firmness become the loudest message you could ever send. I know my worth now. That message pierces through every layer of their false dominance. What's beautiful about boundaries is that they don't just keep the wrong energy out, they make space for peace, clarity, and self-respect to move in. You begin to feel lighter because you're no longer carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. You start to see how much of your life was spent overextending, apologizing, or justifying yourself for simply wanting respect. Boundaries bring balance. They remind you that you can care deeply and still say no, that love without respect is just control dressed in disguise. So when you draw your line, draw it with calm conviction. You're not being rude. You're being real. You're protecting your peace, your time, your emotional energy. And that is the moment the narcissist realizes their control has ended. They no longer have access to your energy. You've reclaimed it, and with it, your freedom. When the mask starts to crack, it doesn't happen with drama or noise. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. The narcissist's mask is their survival tool, their armor against the truth of who they are. It's the charming smile, the perfect confidence, the rehearsed empathy. But when you show no fear, when you stop feeding their ego with attention or validation, the mask begins to slip. You start to see glimpses of the fragile person hiding behind the performance, and what's even more powerful, they start to realize you see it too. The narcissist's identity depends on control. Every word, every gesture, every story they tell is crafted to maintain an image of superiority. But when you're no longer impressed, when you don't react to their arrogance or flattery, you expose the hollowness beneath the act. They thrive when others buy into their illusion. Your detachment steals that audience from them. Without your admiration or fear, they lose their stage, and with it, their sense of self. At first, they may double down. You'll see exaggerated confidence, louder boasting, or sudden outbursts meant to reestablish dominance. But look closer, and you'll notice the cracks widening. The laughter feels forced. The charm becomes mechanical. Their words start to sound rehearsed because they're trying to convince themselves as much as they're trying to convince you. You begin to see the insecurity, the shame, and the emptiness they've been hiding behind manipulation. It's not your job to fix it, but it is your power to stop participating in it. When their mask cracks, their reactions become unpredictable. Sometimes they lash out, desperate to regain control. Other times they retreat, playing the victim to regain sympathy. But every move they make comes from fear. Fear of exposure, fear of insignificance, fear of losing the one thing they crave most, control over how they are seen. Your steady energy exposes what they can no longer hide. What's incredible about this moment is how much clarity it gives you. You begin to realize that the person you feared or idolized was never real. It was a projection. The illusion loses its power once you see it for what it is. You no longer feel the need to argue or prove your worth because you understand that their behavior was never about you. It was always about maintaining their fragile self-image. The breaking of the mask is not your revenge, it's your liberation. You stop living in the world of their manipulation and step back into the reality of your own power. You stop reacting to the surface and start seeing the truth beneath it, and once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. The narcissist may try to rebuild their mask, but it will never work the same way again, not with you. Because now you see them clearly. You see the fear behind the facade, the emptiness behind the arrogance, the human behind the manipulation. And in that moment of clarity, their power dissolves, their mask may crack, but you finally become whole. Emotional detachment is one of the greatest strengths you can develop when dealing with a narcissist. It doesn't mean you stop caring or that your heart turns cold. It means you finally stop carrying emotions that aren't yours. You stop being the sponge that absorbs every outburst, guilt trip, or manipulation they throw your way. Detachment is not avoidance, it's awareness. It's the understanding that you can observe someone's behavior without being controlled by it. When you reach that level of clarity, the narcissist's power over you begins to fade because their control has always depended on your emotional response. For a narcissist, emotions are tools. They provoke you to feel anger, shame, or guilt because your reaction feeds their ego and reaffirms their dominance. But when you begin to detach, when you no longer react to their chaos, they lose that source of energy. Your calmness becomes a mirror that reflects their dysfunction back to them. They can no longer manipulate you with silence or lure you back with false promises because your peace has become your boundary. And that peace, steady, unbothered, grounded, is something they can't understand or destroy. At first, emotional detachment can feel strange, even wrong. You've been conditioned to believe that caring means sacrificing yourself, that love means tolerating pain, and that empathy means accepting disrespect. But detachment is not the absence of empathy, it's the presence of wisdom. It's knowing that you can care deeply while still protecting your soul. It's realizing that your compassion has limits, and those limits are not cruelty, they are clarity. The narcissist will notice your shift, they'll sense the distance and try to pull you back in. They may test your detachment with emotional bait, accusations, guilt, or sudden affection. But once you've truly detached, you see these tactics for what they are, distractions designed to pull you out of your peace. And when you stay grounded, when you no longer fall into the emotional traps, they start to panic, because for the first time they can't reach you. They can speak, manipulate, or even rage, but their words no longer stick to your heart. Emotional detachment is freedom. It gives you space to think clearly, to see patterns that once confused you, and to choose peace over reaction. It allows you to walk away without needing closure, because you've already created it within yourself. You stop asking, "Why are they like this?" and start saying, "This no longer belongs to me." That shift is everything. It's the difference between surviving and thriving. Detachment isn't about building walls, it's about standing in your truth with grace. It's the calm realization that their behavior is a reflection of them, not of you. And in that calm, you find your power again. You stop trying to change them, fix them, or make them see. Instead, you rise above the noise, anchored in peace. And once you live from that space, no narcissist can ever control you again. There comes a moment when you realize that you've stepped beyond their reach. You're no longer reacting, explaining, or defending yourself. You're simply existing in your truth. That's the moment you become untouchable. A narcissist's control depends entirely on your emotional availability, on how much they can influence what you think, feel, and believe about yourself. But once you've reclaimed that inner space, once you know who you are without their approval or their narrative, they can no longer touch you. Not because they've stopped trying, but because their words and actions no longer carry meaning in your world. Becoming untouchable doesn't happen overnight. It's born from countless moments of pain, reflection, and healing. It comes from walking through the fire of manipulation and choosing, again and again, not to let it harden your heart. It's the strength that grows in silence, the confidence that comes from surviving what was meant to break you. A narcissist feeds on emotional chaos, but when you no longer give them that reaction, their control dissolves. They realize that no matter what they say or do, your peace remains unshaken. That's what terrifies them most. Your calm, your clarity, your refusal to play their game. When you become untouchable, you stop seeking validation from them. You no longer look for closure, apologies, or understanding. You understand that none of those things will ever come in the way you deserve, and that realization doesn't make you bitter, it makes you free. You begin to live from a place of self-approval, guided by your own values and truth. The narcissist loses their grip because your identity is no longer built around their opinion of you. You are not their reflection anymore, you are your own light. They may try to re-enter your life, often under the guise of change or remorse. But now you can see through the illusion with crystal clarity. You can listen without attachment, observe without absorbing. Their words may sound the same, but your heart hears differently now. You know peace, and you can't unlearn it. You know that love built on control isn't love at all. That knowledge becomes your shield, a quiet, invisible armor that keeps you grounded no matter how hard they try to shake it. Becoming untouchable is not about arrogance, it's about alignment. It's about choosing peace over performance, truth over illusion, and self-worth over fear. It's realizing that the most powerful thing you can ever do is not fight back but rise above, because true power doesn't shout. It doesn't chase, it simply is. And in that state, you become everything the narcissist cannot be, whole, centered, and free. They can no longer define you, control you, or wound you because you've learned the greatest truth of all. You were never theirs to begin with. You've reclaimed your energy, your power, and your soul. That's what it means to be untouchable.